Well, welcome everybody. My name is Michael Hornstein. I'm here with Gloria Grace Wallace. Hi, Gloria.
Hi.
She is the founder of the Heartlight Centre for Conscious Living. And she's actually been working with me both in a professional sense. And I wanted to take the opportunity today to interview her and learn a little bit more about her work, who she helps. I want to share a little bit about my story and how she's been able to positively impact my life in more ways than one. And just also give you more of an idea of the type of work she does, who she can help, and what sort of outcomes you can expect in your life from working with Gloria. So welcome, Gloria. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the type of work that you do.
Thank you, Michael, for hosting our introduction to the Heartlight Services. I have been living and working now in Australia for about 19 years. In August, it'll be 19 years. And before then, I lived and taught in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And before that, my first 22 years, I lived in Ohio, because I'm American by birth and Australian citizen by choice at this point, but really a citizen of the universe. I don't really identify in a nationalistic way, really. And so really the journey began in Malaysia when I, in addition to my international teaching of a variety of subjects, sort of in a United Nations type school really setting, and director and producer of children's theater. So I began to connect with really beyond the personalities of my students and colleagues, began to connect with things at a soul level, really. And the more that I did that, the more I saw positive responses from my students and colleagues and friends. And I went through the Reiki healing door back in would it have been, I spiritually awoke in 1988 during the 87-88 during the harmonic convergence, which is another workshop we can talk about another time. But it was an awakening for an awful lot of souls on earth at that time. And Reiki just quickened that spiritual awakening for me. And it became a Reiki healing channel and a Reiki teacher. It's hands-on healing, but it's really just tuning into love in the highest vibration to assist others to do their own healing. And at some point, my journey brought me to Australia. And so I left full-time teaching and theater production behind me and hung up my shingle here in Australia, in the state of Victoria, as a full-time holistic therapist and soul coach, life coach, and also down the track engaged in hypnotherapy training. And then in these last couple of years, I've deepened that work by becoming certified in quantum healing hypnosis work, accessing past lives and looking at what that has to do in the journey of a soul. And now also hold circles and have a small community, an intimate community, in which we consider ourselves light workers. And we are here to be vessels for the love and light of Mother, Father, God, the Creator, Source, whatever you want to call it, all that is. Because the earth herself is ascending. She is raising her vibration. She's already moved as of 2012 into fourth density, and now moving into fifth. And humanity, those that are ready, will be ascending or moving up the spiral of evolution with her. And so even in the midst of some of the greatest challenges we've had on the planet for some time, with the conflict and suffering levels where they are, we have been guided to keep keep ourselves as grounded in love and light and positivity and optimism, and know that we are moving forward no matter what the world events might show us. So there you are. That's a nutshell of my journey.
So going back to the beginning of your story, you said in the mid-'80s you had a spiritual awakening. What does that mean? What does that look like?
That's a fantastic question, Michael. And I think most people that would consider themselves conscious and aware and awake means that they know they are not their body. You are not your personality. You are not your mind. You are so much more than that. We are magnificent suns, really, radiant suns, S-U-N-S, but also sons and daughters of the Creator, of creative intelligence. And so an awakening is where often it will come from something traumatic that happens in our lives. And we ask the question, who am I? What am I doing here? There's got to be another way to live beyond the way I'm living now. And we, through those questions, begin to get more and more and hear more and more of the guidance. Books fall off shelves. We bump into people we've never met before, and they help us through the doorway of understanding that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So awakening is where you then discover, and even though we can go through cycles of doubt and we can fall down the rabbit holes and down the bottom of our well in the ocean more often than we'd like to, because that's the human ego personality part of us. But the spiritual part of us, the I am presence part of us, the higher self, the super conscious self, it knows that we're here too. And Michael, I've shared this with you in our sessions. We all have the same triad mission here, even though it can take different forms. We're here to express love, the love that we are, the love that God is. We're here to explore that love, and we're here to create from that love. Everything else is a distraction or an aspect of learning that we still need to do.
So that's a pretty, for people listening, that might be a wild idea for them to hear, that they are not their body, they're not their thoughts, they're not their mind. Now, obviously, in working with you, I've learnt more about that, but can you touch on that a little bit deeper? Because I think a lot of the time we can have these thoughts that enter our mind, or we can have self-sabotaging thoughts or limiting beliefs on ourselves, and we associate that we are those thoughts. So can you elaborate on that idea a little bit more?
Actually, Michael, I've just been guided in preparation, really, I think, for today's conversation with you, is that there is something that those who were brought up in, especially the Christian tradition, and were taught about a concept called the fall from grace, being expelled from the Garden of Eden, where things were perfect and it was a paradise. And then we committed sins against God, we disobeyed God, and then we were expelled from the garden. That has some kernel of an essence of truth in it, in the sense that as a human race, as a species on this planet and in other planets in other galaxies, that fall from grace is us. We're birthed at something called a 7th density level of existence. There are 12. And this is a 3rd density experience in the 3rd dimension, this plane that we're in here on Earth. However, Earth, she's already moved into 4th density. And also, there are some human beings, if we're able to even talk at this level, Michael, who also are moving. They have a foot in the 3rd density, but moving into the 4th density of consciousness, of awareness, of maturity as a soul. So those that step down their vibration in order to have these experiences on the frontiers of creation I think I'll go to Earth because there's a lot going on there, and I want to explore and I want to experience what's going on there. We have to step down from 7th density at which we were birthed, because it's 7 through 12, that is, you don't have a physical body. You're just basically like a glowing star. You're a light being in a solar body. And so when you step down in order to be in these densities and in these dimensions, we can forget who we are. And when we forget who we are, we have amnesia. We don't remember that we are a spiritual being having a human experience, and we begin to identify with, it's all about my body, it's all about my ego personality, it's all about who's doing wrong to me and what's happening in the world. We think that that's the only reality there is. And that's ignorance and unconsciousness. Those who are creating the greatest levels of suffering for others on the planet right now do so from ignorance and unconsciousness, which is why one of the most, an 8th level density being called Jeshua ben Joseph, Christian tradition calls him Jesus for a variety of reasons. But Jeshua was able to say, because he knows the truth and the core of higher density consciousness, there's no judgment, there's no good and evil, there's just this duality that we're experiencing because we chose to come and experience this. But there is the danger that we will forget why we've come, who we really are, and what we're doing here. So that's why Joshua was able to teach and say, forgive them. They know not what they do. If they did know what they were doing, they wouldn't do it. If they remembered that they are the love and light of the Creator, you cannot harm yourself and another sentient being, another human being. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So for people listening, is Joshua, is he a mythical person? Is he a real life person that existed throughout?
He incarnated. He took a human existence in order to plant the seeds of what we call Christ consciousness.
So this has nothing to do with a specific religion?
No.
Because I think people might be confused about that.
Well, and there are those that would not understand or agree with what we're talking about, but this is about unity consciousness. This is about God consciousness, Christ consciousness. The Christ within each of us, the indwelling Christ, means we are all the sons and daughters of God. And if you imagine the sun, the great central sun, which is another word for the Creator, source, every ray of light is a soul extension of God. The Creator wanted at some point to experience itself. So there was the birthing at 7th level density of consciousness, these amazing souls that are eternal. There is no death. There's death of the physical experience, but there is no death truly. And so also, if you imagine the waves of an ocean are not separate from the ocean. The ocean is creative intelligence, God consciousness. And every wave is an extension, is a soul aspect. That's what we are. We are waves of consciousness. But when we step down our vibration, we can forget in that density. It's overwhelming, and we can be forgetful, and we can fall from the grace of God into matter. The ego becomes identified with matter and thinks that's all there is.
So when you say God, you're not referring to an old man with a beard sitting on a chair, right?
Absolutely not. No.
What are you referring to when you say that?
Excuse me. I'm referring to really consciousness, love and light and compassion and all intelligence and infinity and eternity and mathematical numbers that it would take 250 years to number out 10 to the 10th power and beyond. It's really almost incomprehensible, which is why Jeshua and other teachers have referred to God. Jeshua needed our language, even for the beautiful guides and angels that step down their vibration and try and come through those of us that are available for that. The language is very limiting. And so Jeshua, in order for those to be able to, he and other beautiful teachers and way showers were using stories and parables to reach the right side of the brain, not the logical, linguistic, language-based side of the brain, of the mind. And he also used the stories and the parables and a variety of intimacy, levels of intimacy. That's what I'm trying to find the words to say this. And said, I and my Father are one. He could have said, I and my mother, father, God, because God has no gender. But God, in terms of creation, there is the male and the female. Those principles are very real. We all have male and female energies within us. And it's about us being able to balance them because they're both important. But Jeshua used that relationship that people can have to help them be in a more intimate relationship by personifying the Creator as a father. And he would even refer to God at times as Abba, Father.
Got it. So you had your spiritual awakening in the mid-'80s, and then how has your journey progressed to the work that you're doing today?
Well, as I say, Reiki and Reiki healing was where the healing aspect, being able to assist others with that. I've always been good at I've been a natural counselor and teacher all my life. When I was 9 years old, Michael, I'd come home from school and the other kids in the neighborhood would come over to my house, to my garage, and my old Think and Do books from school, my old mathematic books, I'd hand out these old booklets and we'd pretend that we were having school in my garage and I was the teacher. So I've been teaching and actually doing children's theater directing since I was 16 and teaching really since I was 9. So those are natural things that I've gravitated towards. The healing was because I had a classic traumatic childhood. There was much to heal. There was much in terms of at the human ego personality level, a lot I had to learn in terms of forgiveness and how that is related to healing. That's the core of Jeshua's teachings. It's the core of the Course in Miracles, which we believe was channeled from him by Helen Schuckman in the 1970s, preparing for this time of ascension right now, the time that we're in, this shift of consciousness that we're in right now. So the one thing led to another, and then I was so exhausted and I was really burnt out from, it was full on teaching and theater directing, and I just said, what would you have me do? And the Reiki healing began to really increase before I left Malaysia. And I began to do it full time, began to teach meditation classes and Reiki healing circles, and then to have gatherings where we had sacred music, because I'm also a sacred musician. My voice is my instrument, even though I do write music sometimes, songs. And I do that sacred music work with my husband, Jeff. So he's been a part of my journey in these last 13, 14 years.
And who do you work with today? What type of people do you help?
I would say, in order for someone to find me or resonate with me, and I'm doing this conversation with you, Michael, so I can especially reach out to, how old are you? How young are you?
27, 28 in a few weeks.
Yes. So I have find when I work with younger people, that they're definitely here on an accelerated path. And a lot of them, though, if they do not have a spiritual perspective, they can be very despondent right now. And depression is a problem, and just feeling hopeless, especially in terms of climate change challenges. So I know that this work, and that's probably the segue into asking you, for yourself as a young man, as a 27-year-old, what would you say the sessions have been able to assist you with in terms of a personal perspective, or being able to reframe the kinds of things that perhaps you were experiencing before our work together?
Well, it was a weird time in the sense of how we connected. I was actually, I would say, I'd been on the lookout for somebody for about a year at that time, and I wasn't sure who or what type of person I wanted to work with. I just felt something that I needed to chat with somebody, and I wasn't sure if that would go in the form of a traditional talking therapist. And I know that's not what you do. Your work is a lot more transformative. I was also on the lookout for more of a personal coach, and that was more for my professional work and being able to work at my best, optimize my mindset, that type of thing. And I was very surprised that I was able to have all of that with you and more. A lot of things that I had no idea I potentially could even want or need. So the way I would sort of describe my experience in working with you is, and it's completely dependent on what somebody is sort of wanting out of it. I've noticed, so for people listening, a lot of your work is to do with increasing one's consciousness. So being more conscious about every aspect of their life, how they're showing up in their relationships, how they're showing up in work. And the simplest way to describe this for people is anytime something happens, we can call it a stimulus. There's a gap between your response and whatever happens in life. It could be a partner triggering you. It could be having an important meeting with your manager and they've told you you've slipped up, and that person has a choice in terms of how they're going to respond, and that's where that consciousness comes into it. And so the benefits, it's been a challenge for me in terms of trying to pack everything into our sessions, because there's so much that I'd like to work on, is in the form of being a higher, I don't want to say the word achieving, a sort of more dedicated professional who's very clear on his path. And I've got a lot of clarity around limiting beliefs I had to do with my work, and being very, very proud of what I do and owning that, and then really stepping into that. We've worked a lot on my personal relationships, and that can take in the form of someone's intimate relationship, but it's also their relationship with their family, their friends. Relationship with your parents is a huge one, and navigating that. For most people, they've had decades of years where their parents have known them as sort of somebody else, and might be treating them like a child, or treating them still like a teenager. And somebody is 40 and they're still getting mothered by their mum. So being able to have tools and strategies to navigate my way in the world, and just being more aware of that has been extremely powerful for me. We've been working together, I want to say, probably coming up to 4 or 5 months, I'd say roughly.
How does that frame of time feel for you, Michael? Does it feel like it's just flown by, or is there a depth there that you can also feel into?
Oh, for those listening, our first session went for 3 hours. It was more going to be more of an introduction session, and we just started talking, and I thought, wow, I had no idea I had this much to say, and we just kept diving deeper and deeper. But that sort of really set the scene for how we were going to work together.
The tone, didn't it?
Yeah. Yes. And you know, I feel very, very fortunate that I found Gloria at, you know, relatively young age, and that I've the biggest thing is that people need strategies, and you know, we can talk all day and you can come out of a session feeling incredible, but unless you have concrete strategies to actually go out and implement in the real world, when you get into that tiff with your partner, or when you get into that high pressured situation at work, you don't have anything to fall back on. So I like the blend of the more transformative, you know, diving deep into finding out, you know, where someone might be being held back, but then getting actionable strategies is where it sort of ties the two together. So yeah, that's a little bit about my story. And I think Gloria's sees this huge potential in the younger generation, as obviously they're going to be the future. But I would like to ask you, you talked about this awakening and ascension that's happening in this younger generation. What do you see there, and what do you see happening amongst the younger people?
This is actually what some channels call the contingency plan for the earth, is the dispensations from heaven, from the other side, for souls to incarnate with less and less of what we would call a karmic burden, less and less of carrying with them or bringing in with them the old stuff that still has to be cleared. And so, and with a devotion and passion for integrity and for taking action when they see injustice, and when they see that the planet needs the support, and we need to be in right relationship again with Mother Earth, with Lady Gaia. So they are, in that sense, even though, of course, I'm working with people in their 80s, and I work with, you know, young people, teenagers, all across the spectrum. But this is guidance that you are playing a role in, Michael, for us to reach and encourage as many of the younger people as we can. When I say younger, you know, 35 and younger, 40 and younger, who might still wait for another 20 years before they start dealing with their fears and doubts and you know, inner programs. And the time is now. And down the track, I think we'll be exploring perhaps workshops and classes that especially are on a regular basis for, I think that my guides are encouraging us to bring together what we would call communities of awakened conscious souls. So the Heartlight Awakened Community, that's really also what I can't ignore anymore in terms of the guidance that's saying now is the time. People need to know they're not alone. They need to find one another, even if it's virtually, to come together and be able to share that connection at soul level, and to know that we're here on purpose, and that only good will come from this consciousness shift that we're in.
Yes. And you mentioned that the younger generation are on an accelerated path. What does that mean? What are they on an accelerated path for?
Well, I think you are an example. probably in the last 4 months, I feel at times as though you've done 4 years worth of sessions. For you, Michael, it has been almost a weekly commitment. And I see others that I work with weekly, and their acceleration and their shift in positive ways going in the direction that they want to go in. It happens in a much faster, more accelerated way than somebody that, although there are people that, let's say, I've worked with over the last 8 to 10 years, and they know when, and it's probably about 4 times a year, that they'll contact me and say, I've got something that's come up. I've tried clearing it myself with all my strategies that you've taught me, but I know I'm allowed to have help. So Gloria, can I have a session? And then we will clear whatever it is. And it's like seeing, your osteopath, your naturopath 4 times a year, once a season, to get a checkup and a check-in. But up until that point, when people become independent in that way, there are a series of things that can be done to remove old programs from this lifetime, from this childhood in this lifetime, and from past lives. You and I haven't begun to do some of the past life work yet, and I look forward to that, because it's not just about accessing trauma from past lives. There are other exciting things as well. In terms of also bringing forward gifts that we had in previous lifetimes and learnings that we had that we have forgotten. So it's about reclaiming all aspects of who you are.
So this is still quite a foreign concept to me, the idea of past lives, and it's obviously something you would have been understanding of for years now. But for someone where it's not so obvious to them, can you explain, how do we even know we have a past life, and how might that be affecting us?
There are some basic ways that, first of all, people that do best in the work they do with me are those that are open-hearted and open to the principles that underlie the work, the things that I embrace as true. And one of the things that I embrace, and that so many that do the work similar to my work, is that we embrace that we have had more than one lifetime. We don't get one chance and it's over and that's it. If that were true, I don't think I could get up in the mornings thinking that there's too many people suffering out there this is their only life. That is not the case. We are infinite and eternal, and we do have a rest in between lifetimes. We do have some input into when and how and where we reincarnate, we re-embody in a physical body, and at what density level, depending on our level of consciousness. So, for example, if we are drawn to certain areas in the world, or even certain geographical areas where we might live in a particular country, and we can't explain it, or we have phobias about certain things, whether it's drowning or, my Reiki master, she was Dutch, and her husband had a past life in which he was crucified, because being crucified was a normal, brutal, horrible way of putting people to death at the time that Joshua lived. It was a Roman way of making an example of everybody and terrifying the people that they ruled over. And so her husband, they did a past life regression, and you don't have to experience it happening to you again. If it was a traumatic death, you can just observe it, or we can fast forward. You don't even have to see it or re-experience it. We're there to heal if there was trauma and he had brought trauma with him into this lifetime. But he actually could feel, where the nails went and what happened to him. And yet the phenomenal healing that came from him letting go of the trauma of that lifetime. So, for example, my first visit to Australia back in 1991, I went to Byron Bay for the first time, which is a beautiful part of New South Wales in Australia. And I was climbing up to the famous Byron Bay Lighthouse. And I got halfway up. I was with two people I had just met on my trip to Australia. They were Australians. And I leaned over a balcony and I just began to sob uncontrollably. And the other two that were with me were fairly intuitive and spiritually awake because I was in 1991. And they said, Gloria, is this what we think it is? Is this a past life, do you think? And I said, I think so. I said, I don't know immediately. I'm having some visions. But I basically was the wife of a whaler who never came back. And I think I threw myself down on the rocks below. I never made it to the lighthouse, but I did get some confirmation later with somebody that can do this work to confirm that was true. I've had past lives in being put to death as a Cathar in southern France. So I've been to the ruins where 260 of us were put to death because we did not acknowledge the authority of the Pope. We only acknowledged Jeshua's teachings in their original form. And the Catholic Church, it was the first crusade of all the crusades. It was against the Cathars. It took them 125 years to wipe all the Cathars out, but they did. But, here I am again, reborn in this lifetime. But I went on a 6-country pilgrimage in 2001. And in each of those countries, I did forgiveness work and prayers for peace and healing within myself because I had had a past life in all 6. I just turned it over to Spirit and said, guide me. I'm not interested in being a tourist anymore. If I travel anywhere, it needs to be for a purpose other than just entertaining myself and being a culture vulture, because I'd already done plenty of travel for that for the previous decades. So it was 6 weeks, a week in each country. I ended up in Germany. I went to England, Scotland, Wales, southern France, Italy, Germany, and Italy. So I ended the pilgrimage in Assisi, where St. Francis is famous for where he lived and had his experiences and his teachings, and felt some pretty phenomenal experiences there with the St. Francis energies and Jeshua's energies. But I also went to Germany, and with a colleague of mine who was married to a German citizen, and I had taught with her in Malaysia, but she was back in Germany. She said, I've always wanted to go to the first concentration camp that Hitler ever designed. She said, will you go with me? Because my husband won't come with me. So I tuned in, and I knew that I was meant to go and do forgiveness work and peace prayers there. So we came across, it was a very moving experience. And because I'm an empath, and that's the other thing, is this is work that I reach out to people who are empaths, wanderers, star seeds, light workers. If any of those names mean anything to you, or you perk up and you resonate with any of those things, then you probably are one of them or more. An empath is someone who really feels deeply the suffering of others and the suffering of the planet. And so there's a whole list of strategies and things we need to do for self-care, because otherwise our nervous systems can really be overwhelmed, and we can be easily depressed on a day-to-day basis if we don't find some way to neutralize how open our hearts are. So we were touring the concentration camp, and we came to one of the buildings where they did scientific experiments on Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, whoever was less than human in the eyes of the Nazis. And she said, I can't go down there, Gloria, but I think you're supposed to go down there. And I said, yes, I will go down there. So I went down into the little laboratory because all of this was a museum. But of course, the energies, for those of us that are open to them, are very real. And so I did peace prayer work and forgiveness work there, down in that space. Because this is part of what light workers are here to do, is to neutralize and to clear the density of these old traumatic experiences that humanity has endured. So, so in answer to the question of how do you know whether or not you've had I at times have, even when I would hurt my elbow or stub my toe, I would have flashbacks and visions of being beaten with the butt of rifles. It felt like a World War type situation. Also, in a course that I did, a 9-day consciousness raising and healing course called Avatar. The last 3 days of that course, you do past life regression work. And people don't have to be in the room with you while the facilitator is helping you access your past life. I have been martyred many, many times in past lives for my teachings, for my beliefs, or being a part of a group that held beliefs that were not accepted, such as when I was in Cathar in southern France. And I was put to death in a spiked witch's chair. And I relived that with the facilitator, and people chose to stay in the room. Every single one in the course stayed in the room with me, as though to hold the space while I, even just clearing my throat with these energies, remembering. It was incredibly traumatic. I've had traumatic lifetimes in Atlantis, in Egypt, in the time of Jeshua, because, time of Jeshua. So people will have an inkling, usually, Michael. I don't know about you, because we haven't talked about that very, very much yet in our sessions. But if and as we become open to it, there are indicators that there are certain things that you're passionate about, or that you're drawn to, or places that you just have to visit, and you just feel at home in a particular place, or feel at home with another individual. And you may have known each other in a past life. So those are some of the indicators of past lives.
So if everyone's had a past life, almost by definition, okay. If everyone's had multiple past lives, almost by definition, they've suffered some trauma in one way or shape or form. And
yes,
are you sort of suggesting...
Again, depending on your level of consciousness, the more conscious you are, the more aware you are, the more you realize it's just an experience. It doesn't define who you are. But if you, in order to endure the experience, a fragment of your soul kind of chipped off or was broken off in order to cope with what happened, that's also what we're doing when we do past life regression. We're retrieving those broken bits of yourself that have been left behind.
So will someone need to be...
That's why it's so important to
so
do
someone will need to have a certain level of consciousness already to be able to engage in this type of work, I would guess.
An openness, absolutely, an openness. Basically, you ask such excellent questions. I love talking with you, Michael. There has to be an openness. You're going to get the most out of the Heartlight sessions and the work that I and my guides and angels and your guides and angels have to offer us. If your heart and your mind are open to the fact that you are not just a physical body. You have one life and you die. That is about as limited as it gets. And if you are open to, there must be something more. and I want to know more about it, and I want to access this knowledge, this sacred knowledge that is pouring through at this time. In since really 1950 onwards, again, we've had so much help pouring in, and so many of us put our hands up and said, I'm volunteering, I'm coming through. I may not really need to be here because I've already been there, done that, but I will come again, because what were we able to do once again as a species in World War II? We were able to destroy the planet and this civilization. That's already happened to 2 other planets in our solar system. And so the company of heaven, all the beautiful creator gods, aspects of God, angels and ascended masters, and all of our birth angels, they all came together in councils of light and said, okay, what do we do to ensure that this civilization does not get destroyed and the planet does not get destroyed? They can have limited conflicts up to a point. So I would say, according to some knowledge that I just revisited recently, there have been at least 6 times since World War II that we have averted nuclear disaster, because there is a dispensation, because we have free will. This is a free will planet, free will solar system. And they're not allowed to interfere, even though we can make a lot of stupid decisions and hurtful decisions and destructive ones. Now it's up to a certain point. They are not going to allow us, even though we've got the matches, we know how to light fires, they're not going to let us burn the whole school down, the whole playground down. So they're allowed to interfere up to a point. And so it's about the knowledge that they're also allowing to downpour with the additional light, with the additional souls that have come through. I mean, our planet's population has exploded because everybody and his brother that's been allowed to have a Willy Wonka golden ticket to be here at this time. It is a significant time to be here, to assist in the earth raising her vibration to 5th density, to humanity raising its consciousness along with her, those that are ready. And of course, we're often asked, what happens to the souls that are just so unconscious, so ignorant? They're just so about service to self and not service to others. What happens to them? Where do they go? Because there have been a lot that have been checking out in the last 2 years, especially. There are other planets in other universes that are 3rd density, that have this duality of up and down and light and dark and good and bad, and a belief in disease and destruction and poverty and conflict. And so souls that still need that experience, or that's their level of consciousness, there are places for them to go for that. The earth is not going to be supporting that in the decades to come. So that's the good news, Michael.
Well, I think you provided a beautiful reframe of the idea that people feeling like they're being born now, where there's a lot of chaos and a lot of destruction, and the idea that there could be with the war going on at the moment between Russia and Ukraine and global pandemics. But the reframe that you provided is that they're actually here for a reason.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, they can feel quite overwhelmed with a lot that's going on, and the burden that they have to do this themselves. But can you just touch on, I know especially amongst the younger generation, and you've sort of mentioned a little bit before, but those feelings that people have of anxiety and depression and overwhelmed, why might they be feeling that now, and what can they do about it?
So number one, we have a very limited perspective. And in that limited perspective, if we really identify with this is my body, and if my body isn't perfect, or that's my perception, that's depressing. If I think I'm imperfect in terms of my personality, or how many friends I have, or how many likes I get on Facebook, that's depressing. If I feel that my family isn't perfect, that I'm not loved enough, accepted enough, I don't feel a sense of belonging, all of that is depressing. And if I look around me and I see so many other people depressed or suffering because I care about suffering, then that's depressing. So if we open that lens, we get the bigger picture, and we realize that's not what we all are. It isn't just this small little life. That it is a magnificent, light and love-filled life that is in this sort of what feels very limiting, this physical body, but with a bigger perspective and with other strategies, whether it's meditation and self-inquiry and healing work and getting support with the kind of services that Heartlight offers. These are the kinds of things that allow us to be lifted up on a more regular basis. Journaling is very important as well. It's about being in right relationship, not just with spirit, with source. If we just say, you know what, I don't have all the answers. I can turn this over to spirit. I can turn this over to my I am presence, my superconscious self. Show me the way. I will listen. I will follow the signs. Just by acknowledging that there is a power, a creative intelligence that we are a part of, not separate from. The only time we suffer, Michael, is when we feel separate from creative intelligence, from source. When we feel separated from source, we can feel alone. The ego has convinced us of a falsehood. Fear is false evidence appearing real. You've heard that before, perhaps. Fear is an illusion because we can only be fearful if we feel separate from source, from the great central sun of all life, all intelligence, all prosperity, oneness, unity consciousness. In that separation, that's when we can feel alone and depressed and not want to be here. So the Heartlight work is about bringing us into right relationship with spirit and with ourselves. Because how are we going to relate in a healthy, positive way with anyone else or anything else if we're not in right relationship with life itself, source, and with ourselves? That's the nutshell for everything else. That's the essence.
So much to unpack. I know we are coming up, I think we're just past an hour. I've got 2 more questions for you, which I think would be really important. So for the first one, what should someone do right now if they might be in a job where they aren't fully fulfilled? They still show up. Their heart's not completely in it. They know that there's something else. There's something more to life that they're not currently experiencing right now, and that could be somebody in their 50s who's worked a corporate job for 30 years. You know, they've got the house, they've got the 2 kids, but they feel like something is still missing.
They might even have a holiday house, and they still feel like something's missing. Yeah.
Or they might be in a relationship where they don't feel at home. They might feel like their partner can almost be a stranger to them. They don't fully understand them. And so is this something you can help with? What would you say to these people? I think these are very common themes which pop up with someone.
And I have supported, including my own husband and my own daughter. I have assisted people. It's not a quick fix all in one session, but then things rarely are. And that's where I consider a person to be very brave, I believe this is the bravest work on the planet, is to face one's inner doubts and inner dragons, shall we say. And you're allowed to have help. You do not have to do this by yourself. If we could all do it instantly just because we said, I want this to change, and then I wouldn't have the work that I have to do. So what I do with an individual or a soul that is in that situation is the last thing I have them consider is to quit tomorrow and then have their entire nervous system and their entire ego personality overwhelmed with, oh my God, what happens now? So we have a look at the fact that everything happens for a reason. We look at what we think the reasons are why things are showing up in our life this way. What is this a reflection of within ourselves? For example, somebody very near and dear to me that I've been working with on this issue, one of her closest colleagues told her after an upset at work, you need to quit because you're worth more than this, and there's been a pattern of this, and you should just send them a text. And she said, I'll meditate on this. Let me meditate on this. And so then in consultation with me, we talked about how certain couple of people at work, including their manager, was reflecting back to them a lack of respect. In other words, being critical in front of others, especially what you considered put downs at work that were unprofessional, all of that. So we did a little bit of a dive, and Michael, you can appreciate this because I've done this with you, of course, because this is a normal strategy that I do with the Heartlight work. On a scale of 0 to 10, I asked her, where are you in terms of self-respect? If 10 out of 10 represents you feel you respect yourself 100%. And she said, she knew where I was going with this. She said, I'm probably between 5 and 6 most days. And I said, so 40% of you is not getting respect in the outer world. So what would happen if you increased your level of self-respect? Because it's an energetic universe. The universe is going to reflect back to us what we put out, what we think, what we believe, no matter how limiting or untrue those beliefs are. For us, they're true. And she said, if I was a 9 or a 10 in terms of self-respect, I'd only have 10% of the time where I would have a lack of respect reflected back to me. And I said, and how do you think you'd handle it? Do you think it would offend your ego personality as much? She said, no, because I'd have too much self-belief and self-respect. I wouldn't be dependent. I'd know that it was about the other person, not about me. So, Michael, the answer to that is we do inner work first. There's no plotting out, oh, what would you really love to do? Yes, that's part of the work. How soon do you think, Gloria, I can find a new job, and how do I go about doing the manifesting? We'll talk about those things too, but only when I have somebody right now. I think I'm going to be working with them today, actually. Somebody overseas who is in the midst of a job that she's pretty clear she wants to leave. But I said, until you show up at that job, giving 100% of yourself every day, because you are paid for giving 100%, and you do not feel good inside if you do not give your best. Because most of the people that find themselves to working with me, Michael, including yourself, really have high values of integrity. And when we are not our best selves, we feel pretty icky. And then we want to project that upset onto other people. We want to blame others, or we want to blame the world or blame life because we don't like feeling guilty. We want to get rid of the guilt. We don't like feeling inadequate, like we're not giving our best. So that's where we would start within the soul that I'm working with and supporting. And then as they become more confident, as you become more able to increase self-love, self-respect, self-worth, self-belief, then you're going to create meaningful work. You're going to draw meaningful work to you that allows you to bring your gifts to that work.
I think it's a beautiful reframe of that. One thing I just wanted to add to that for people listening is a lot of people may not have ever engaged with a professional or even just with somebody external for any type of consultation. You know, the words, people think of the word like therapy or counseling, and there's I think often this stigma that someone's broken and they need to be fixed, and or that their situation is too complicated and that nobody would understand it. And that was definitely something I wanted to share from my story, is a limiting belief I had, where it's such a silly one in hindsight. I was initially chatting to the person that connected me with you, and I thought, I want them to be in their 30s. They need to be young so they can understand my problems and the challenges that I have in the modern world. And boy, was I completely wrong. So I think that's something for people to understand, is there are people that understand them. They're, you know, this is your profession. This is something you've done for decades, and your ability to hone in and quickly identify what might be holding somebody back, or what a simple reframe they had. You know, just even before we started recording for the interview today, there was a little thing you caught me up. I slipped in a little bit of a language that I had. So, you know, this is a work in progress for everybody. One last question I have for you, Gloria.
Michael, let me just respond to that for a moment by saying that my service, my capacity for support in envisioning positive changes for the souls I work with is based on lived experience, not just my training, not just all the strategies. I probably have been trained in maybe 40 modalities. It feels like that. And I probably use about 5 of them at this point, because I'm guided to integrate what has worked with me first and foremost. So what I'm sharing with you is, I was 27. I know what kinds of challenges I had at 27. And I know what kind of challenges I continue to, live, or that show up because I'm a human being. Even though I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. So it is lived experience that I'm sharing with you. That's all. And I'm only sharing the things that have worked to keep me on the planet. Because, you know, I too, those souls who consider themselves wanderers, they've gone from, one star system to another, or star seeds, or here to seed this consciousness from other star systems besides Earth. We can feel like we don't belong here. It doesn't feel like home, because it's not where we're originally from. And that sense of not belonging, it's a big one. It's really, really not easy. And so a lot of young people, including some people very dear to me, have and continue to feel this way and need support to remember. So what I was going to say to you in terms of the whole notion that you're broken and need to be fixed by somebody, it's really, I am a healing companion. I walk with you as you remember. I'm just helping you clear things out of the way so you can remember who you are and why you're here. Now that is, to me, the most exciting work on the planet.
Absolutely. So my last question for you, what vision do you have of the future?
You are just wonderful in your questions. The vision, and I've actually worked with some channels, including myself, and there's a lot of channeled information and knowledge about the new Earth and the future of Earth's consciousness and the souls here. is that we are, when you move out of duality consciousness, which is what third density is here.
And just quickly for people listening, can you just explain what duality consciousness is?
It means, again, opposites.
Yeah.
All the time, that it's up and down and in and out and back and forward and light and dark. And we get caught up in that as a drama for opposing all the time, opposition, conflict. Whereas what we mean by Christ consciousness is that we transcend that viewpoint to returning to unity consciousness, meaning there's only oneness. There's only one consciousness. We're all an aspect of it. And so when you are living at that level of vibration, of course, then you don't have the belief and experience of poverty and lack and disease and decay and conflict and suffering, in the sense that a duality and the density here is such a low vibration that there's still that need to experience it and learn from it. Those of us who are like, you know what, I'm over it. I'm done. I don't need that experience anymore. I understand what that's about, and I'm returning to my original vibration. I'm on my way back to 7th level density consciousness and moving on to 4th and 5th level. 4th, and these are all coordinated with the 12 chakras. You've got your 7 basic energy centers, the root chakra at the root of the spine, the sacral chakra, the solar plexus, the heart, the throat, the third eye, the crown, and beyond. And 7, and then the other 5. And so this is about love, understanding, unity consciousness, wisdom, and then we're that intuitive connection with our higher superconscious mind and being, and then that spiritual part of us that truly knows that we are not our physical bodies only, that this is not the only life we have. So the vision is one of peace, inner peace, outer peace, prosperity, equality, integrity, justice, if there's even a need for that concept at some point. Because, for example, in the country of Portugal, and I'm not sure how many decades it's been, the phenomenal turnaround of those people incarcerated because of mental health problems and drug abuse being illegal and drug use being illegal. What they did was legalize, allow the drug use, knowing that people that are addicted, it's a mental health issue. They also understood the connection between if you actually have your own home. When you're not homeless, Michael, you are you're the tendency to feel anchored and more safe and not choose crime as a way to live. The crime rates are just so diminished because they found homes for people, mental health support. The world will move in that direction, but there are some countries, some systems more enlightened that have already been showing us the way. In Scandinavia, they know that if we don't have from childhood a relationship with the earth, if those children aren't learning outdoors, if they're not connecting with the trees and with living things, not only will they have mental health issues later on, but they will not care about the planet. It is not just about jobs, even though green jobs are what young people know that the politicians could be campaigning on. The economy, if we're just focused on the economy and we have an uninhabitable world, what's the point of the economy focus? So they cannot be separated. They cannot be. So we're right back to the whole issue of oneness, unity consciousness. Thank you so much for these wonderful questions. Wow.
I think it's a brilliant note to finish on. Yeah.
Yes.
So where can people find you if they want to connect with you and learn more about your work? Where can they find you?
There is a woo-woo website because if you've made it even through to the end of this interview, or you're still resonating with and haven't found everything too woo-woo and too out there, then that means you could be very ready for opening up your heart and mind to the kinds of things that you're here for on this planet right here, right now. So heartlight.com.au, heartlight.com.au, there's a way to send me an email with questions, or you could have a look also on the booking page of the website to see what kind. There are some packages there, some discounted packages, or I'm even open to a complimentary 30 minute introduction to the work and answering some basic questions. So we can do that as well. And so yeah, that's how you can get a hold of me.
Awesome. And guys, don't feel as though you need to be far down your spiritual path or far down your personal growth journey. Even just myself reading through a lot of the stuff on Gloria's website, I'm still wrapping my head around a lot of the ideas that she was talking about today and on the website. But you can still receive tremendous benefit from the work. And this is all an ongoing growth journey for everybody involved. So Gloria, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you, Michael. And I would ask you, just in sort of final analysis as well, is that you've had very practical things to do at the end of each of our sessions, right? It is a very
Absolutely.
practical set of things that is involved in this work. We're not just having airy-fairy woo-woo conversations.
Yes. Yeah.
It's very practical, and I meet you where you are.
Yeah.
It's very real. And
Absolutely. You're not going to come out of a session with feeling like you can climb Mount Everest and then the next day everything goes back to where it was. There's a specific, Gloria calls it an action plan that you get at the end of each session. And this is work that you do in between sessions, whether it's weekly, fortnightly, or monthly or beyond. To make sure that you're implementing the things that you're learning, and you're not just coming there to feel good and chat about the challenges in your life. This is it's about transforming and not just.
And the thing that is such a blessing for me that I really value is usually by the end of even just the first session, what people usually, and I believe you did as well, Michael, express is that they feel hopeful. They have a reframe. They have a new perspective, even in just the first session, to be able to say, I know that good can come from this, this investment. So it's my pleasure and privilege to do this work.
Fantastic. Gloria, thank you so much again. I'll chat to you soon.
Thank you, Michael. And welcome. Please contact me, heartlight.com.au website, and then there's a way to email me. So I look forward to hearing from anyone who actually was able to hear our interview today or our conversation. Thank you. Everyone's welcome.
Awesome.